hours. Okay, everybody, it's time to go into Mallory's. Thank you, Mallory.
All right. Are we ready? I can hit.
Ready.
Amazing. Let's go back here. Share. Resume share. Hold on. This is stop share. Did you see my PowerPoint? I didn't see my PowerPoint.
I didn't see your PowerPoint.
Okay, because it was like, you want that thing up there? And I was like, yeah. And then it was like, where is it? And I went, okay.
Try again. Try again.
Yeah, I'm trying again. Oh, I got it. I got it. It's like sometimes when it does full screen like that, it doesn't like it. Okay, here we go. Share screen. This thing. Share.
Okay, cool. We see it. We see it.
Great, great. Okay. So I left here with the book. That's how I landed my teaching opportunity, essentially by word of mouth and having a network of people looking out for me. I have just about 2 more projects that I'm currently working on. I wanted to share with you just so you're fully up to date. These 2 are also in progress. But here's the next one. So George Washington University also has its own museum that's affiliated with the Textile Museum. This is what it looks like. One of their collections is called the Washingtonia Collection. And the Washingtonia Collection is a collection of things like maps and postcards and kind of like historical ephemera affiliated with the kind of inception and planning of Washington, D.C. being the nation's capital. And so essentially they had like a proposal page printed up and on bulletin boards saying that they wanted people to engage with the permanent collection. So I took a look at it. I wrote a proposal. They liked it. Here we are. So my proposal is they have what they call Civil War covers. And these Civil War covers obviously are from the Civil War time. And they have these kind of nationalistic, patriotic stamps. And essentially they are much like a postcard, but there's no kind of text. They're kind of more like an envelope, if you will. And my proposal was for essentially me to scan each of these. There's 155 of them in the collection. They were originally trying to make me do a blog post. I hate the idea of a blog post. I want this to be more legitimate. So I'm also pushing to, since I'm an adjunct professor, my position ends in a few weeks. And just more on that is you don't know like when they'll need you again. So also having reasons to be in the area or continually affiliate with the university is my prerogative. So I was saying that I'd even be willing to help scan some of the rest of the collection to make sure that they're all on site, because only some of them are photo documented. And the intention is to essentially do all 155 of the Civil War covers. And essentially it's going to be text oriented. I'm not sure if I'm going to physically write it with my hand or print it in like a kind of typed print, but we're going to scan these documents and then overlay the text. And I just want to share you a couple of these. So each of these kind of text chunks, if you will, would exist on their own envelope. So the first one says, "It is said that America has not had a war on domestic soil for over 200 years. This common misconception does not account for the war on terror and the war on drugs. If it's our youth that take military-grade weapons into schools to massacre their peers, if those assembled to maintain order are those that lead state-sanctioned assassinations, and if political division were the only thing that unifies us, then are we not a country already amidst a civil war?" The second one I have is, "What is the difference between war and warfare? Warfare is the action of war. The battles and moments of peril we Americans might imagine exists in a field, desert, or forest. But if war is not active in the manner that warfare is, then when does war end? If war is not a verb but a noun, then its existence does not start and end like warfare. It simply evolves in a slippery new form to perpetuate conflict and difference in people, to remain transfixed into the present and future. The third one says, as Americans following the global pandemic and the inception of fake news and MAGA Republicans, the only collective American identity is one of political division. However, the division is set in the bedrock of a unified perspective that we all agree that our politicians do not resemble ourselves. We are in such great agreement in that sense that we cannot stomach another politician resembling the past. That political extremism is the new wave. We wish for a quick and hasty change for better and only settle with different circumstances and greater social upheaval. I think there's only just two more. So the next one goes, 2 years ago was January 6, 2021. The mark of a direct militia act from a right-wing extremist group incited by former President Trump, which single-handedly was an act permitted by the leader of our country to enact civil warfare and topple our democracy. How can we avoid civil war with tanks on the streets and two divided political parties in our country? And the last one is, our buildings might not be blown up by bombs, but they're being shattered in construction to create a new form of refugee, not one by war, but one of gentrification and urbanization, which houses a different form of displacement and fracture of identity. So that's kind of the current state of where this project is. And then the other thing, these are like totally raw, almost uncomfortably raw projects, but I was staying late one day at the Corcoran working on that clay table project, halfway kind of ducking because they didn't necessarily think, I was like not sure how appropriate it was being an adjunct faculty member, like working late hours in the studio. And a student approached me and he had mentioned that he was the painter, and he asked me why I was making that project. And I have to say, like, my internal voice of like, you know, the no, which is like, oh, I have to do this to make this project so that I keep an active showing record so that I can make this thing, so I can keep contributing to my portfolio, so that my work doesn't become out of date, so that I can still be, you know, able to teach this, that, the other, you know, so I'm commodifiable, all these things. But I didn't answer the question with any of those responses. I answered it with a question, which I said, why do you make your paintings? And he says, for fun. And it was just like the craziest break for me to be like, whoa. And I kind of was just sitting with that, and I was like working a little bit more, and there was another girl in the studio. And a little time after that, I walked over and I kind of complimented her on what she was doing. And I said, like, oh, she looked a little older. So I was like, oh, is that your capstone? This, that, the other, or are you doing that for class? And she also said, no, I'm just doing this for fun. And I kind of was like really thrown off my game, like, holy cow, like, what are these kids doing that I'm not doing? And so interestingly enough, that girl, her name is Elisa, and she is a really wonderful student. She's now a studio arts major, and I'm really enjoying the kind of, we're starting to kind of work together, and I'm just trying to kind of come back into the place that making is fun. And that it's not only for like professional stair climbing, because of course, and I don't mean that from a total cynical place, but in a lot of ways, if you're not making, you kind of, it really stifles and glass ceilings your ability to keep going. So I feel like it's become very pressurized after graduating, that I have felt really pressured to keep making and all of that. So I've been now having a bunch of fun with this student, Elisa, and she's just amazing. And we were talking about an article she read following, talking about over optimizing things. And when I was also teaching at Dundalk High School, I didn't mention this, but my first year I taught 2 classes that were engineering, but it was really focused on the engineering/design process. And when you redesign something, you design something because you identify a problem, and then you try and iterate and brainstorm and test and evaluate and then find what the problem is again. And it's cyclical. But in this circumstance, the idea of over optimizing is you're redesigning for redesigning's sake, and there's actually no problem at all. So we were kind of having fun with the idea of how do we make super clunky things that are rudimentary in design and work perfectly fine, and how do we overcomplicate them to kind of show how nonsensical the idea of over optimizing is. So we kind of came up with this idea of a hands-free spoon, and I've been talking to a borosilicate glass fabricator, and this kind of abject experience of like pouring soup in and having this glass apparatus hanging from above and us like suckling off these two spoons and having it like splatter on us. So kind of loved this. And then we were talking about this idea of a 2-person tampon. And we were actually, this right now is just like stills from a video we have not edited and things we haven't really thought about. And we had a bunch of ideas going into this, originally trying to talk about again, this idea of like over optimizing being like dumb. If 2 people are bleeding and you're filling like tampons fast, or you know, like that wasn't even really the idea. But again, it's kind of like we were thinking about labor, and she really thinks a lot about labor when it comes to women's labor and labor in the home. And so we kind of were just talking about all these different things, and we just kind of went into the process of doing the performance. And I, in all truth, have actually not since grad school started making work that I didn't know what I was making until I was doing it. And I'm still in that process of not knowing what I'm making. And we only did this like 2 days ago. So I'm just showing you something that I'm not quite so sure what it is. But in the same vein of that symposium on how do we gather now, at the end of the document, I start proposing the idea that we should consider a practice of gathering and what does it look like. And ironically enough, we were both, you know, menstruating and bleeding 2 days ago. And it's been like the craziest like solar eclipse astrological stressful week. And here we actually just kind of were playing around, and it became this beautiful gathering moment for us to kind of rest and play. And yeah, I don't know. I still don't quite know what it is yet, but it was a really, really special thing. And we did it for about an hour. And I do like the idea that we're physically tethered together, that you can kind of see that string that unifies us. And it was really interesting that when we changed, there was kind of a phantom string. Like there was such a level of consideration for how the other person moved and how it would like twang the other, that I was kind of moving. And since we did that for about an hour, like I was very aware of where her body was following that. And it was even a conversation of like, is this somehow in response to the pandemic, thinking about being so far away? How do we practice proximity? So these are like things that I'm trying to look at and think about. And the last kind of thing that's unrelated to my practice was I had Christine share with you this article, How to Be an Artist, 33 Rules to Take You from Clueless Amateur to Generational Talent, or at least help you live a life a little bit more creatively, by Jerry Saltz. I think this article is absolutely hilarious and adorable, to be honest with you. And there's one lesson in particular that I think about this so often, just this one lesson. I think about it all the time. And lesson 22 says, it takes only a few people to make a career. Talking about that you only need like one dealer. Collectors, you need approximately 5 or 6. And they'll just acquire your work over, you know, over the years. And that critics, you would ideally have about 2, and that they hopefully 2 or 3, and they sort of know what you're doing. And that you have a curator or 2 that are your generation or older, and they put you in shows from time to time. And that adds up to about 12 people or less, and you only need 12 people to believe in you. And I think that that is so special and humbling and rewarding, and something I regularly remind myself of this fact on an ongoing basis, because I mean, it by no means is easy trying to make a career in the arts. But at the same time, what I think is really key is that it is cumulative, right? Like our work is cumulative. And I think that faith, and I'm not getting dogmatic and I'm not necessarily talking about religion, but even just talking about faith in yourself, is so paramount, because really you have to trust that the former you or the younger you has kind of put in the work to get you where you presently are. And you are putting in the work for your future self. And essentially, this is the cumulative work where if you have one person who buys a work, that's one of your 5 or your 6 people, you know, and that is the process of you making your own career. And honestly, like in reverse, and I don't mean this to really speak ill of people, but you might be finding yourself in circles with people who have jobs that you want, and you look at their art and you're like, kind of like, why? You know, or like, what is that? Or that's not for me, or, you know, and it really comes down to the fact that to make it, you just need to be vetted by a few, for better and for worse. So it's really a matter of, I would say, like continuity and just cumulative action. As long as you stick with it, like you will get there. It's not even an if, it is absolutely a promise. It is really just a matter of, you know, as I said at the beginning in response to Sam Vernon's Instagram, it's about having patience and grace and and forgiving yourself. But most importantly, it's about taking baby steps. So that's the end of my presentation. I have my email, my website, if those are at all interesting to you, but I'm more than excited and welcoming questions at this time.
Yay!
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing, but if somebody needs this, I can always just say it again. Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Mallory.
No, thank you for having me.
Cool. Do folks have questions? For Mallory?
So you said that you worked with the author of that book, with like for your academic career, preparing for your applications. Did she serve as like a formal career coach and like did you pay her to help with the materials, or?
How much did you pay the get tenure?
It was like, okay, so it was definitely in like multiple hundreds of dollars, if I'm being honest, but you can pick however many documents you want to work on. And I didn't do every single one with her. I worked on my diversity statement, my statement of teaching philosophy, my teaching CV, and my cover letter. I did those 4. And essentially you get 4 edits. And she completely goes like line for line and says all this stuff. And she also like tells you what chapters to read and like how to inform where you're starting, with even just drafting the document. And then she essentially goes line by line with you. It's not like a face-to-face. We don't Zoom. We don't do anything like that. She would just essentially make edits and then write me an email. But it's a very long, thorough email and a lot of very thorough notes. And I will say, to her credit and to someone else's credit, you guys wouldn't have been there at the time, but Michelle Carlson is somebody who used to be a faculty member at CCA and actually ironically now works at Corcoran. I never had the luxury of doing units with her out there, but when I heard that she was coming here and I was moving in the same summer, I sat down with her and I asked her a lot of questions on how to get oriented to the field. And she said, you have to be good at applying. And something she mentioned as well, which I think both people mirror, is when you write your documents, especially cover letters, you don't want to tell people, you want to show, not tell, is what everyone tells me. And it's very, very true. You want to show, not tell. So if they have a list of characteristics like, oh, you must be detail oriented, you need to be committed to diversity, you need to this, that, the other, the very standard list. That's not asking you to go, I'm a detail-oriented person who's committed to diversity. It's not saying that, because that would be telling. But how do you show it? How do you, all application writing is a storytelling. So how do you share the stories of the experiences you've already done that shows that commitment? So like my Black X work, where I was, you know, a co-founder of Black X, and I, you know, was appointed the chief of art relations. That's my story when I talk about my commitment to diversity, right? So it's a lot of showing, not telling, is like the shortest way of putting it.
I bet working at Dundalk High School was a commitment to diversity too.
It is too, but that's not the one that I wrote. I like wrote the other ones. I'm like, but yeah, I mean, very much so as well. And I mean, I now work at Community College of Baltimore County, which is in the same county. And one of the 3 locations where I manage the permanent art collection is Dundalk. So I'm still in that community. And interestingly enough, because I served that community as a high school teacher, it showed that kind of ability of like, oh, you understand our student body. You are dedicated to serving this population. You are here. And it's extremely rewarding working with the Baltimore County population, to be honest with you. So I am really happy to continue that work. And I'm happy to be doing it under different school rules and policies and less censorship.
Another question? Mallory?
I feel like a big part of like being an artist is like the work-life balance, and I feel like especially when you're starting out, there's a tendency to like do everything and try to like push as hard as you can to like everything that you want. I think I'm kind of wondering like how do you manage to balance everything, or like what is your life kind of like?
I'm really bad at balancing, but I will tell you exactly what I do. I am kind of a workaholic, but I just tell myself that like the way I started was I moved here and I worked at a brewery and I was miserable. I'm an extremely cerebral person and I was in like the sexist environment and was like, geez, oh, peace. How did I end up here? This is not what I signed up for. Like, and so I just have been working really hard and a lot, and I will elaborate to answer your question. But to get into the context that I feel resembles who I am on the inside and provides me the opportunities in which I want to participate in. So that's kind of like why I'm a crazy industrious person. So I'm going to kind of answer, I don't even know how to really go about that, but I have some ideas. So one thing I do I try to be really organized because I think that helps at least quiet the mind and tell yourself, well, if this thing really matters to me, how do I make time doing that amidst doing all this other stuff, like teaching full time and having a long commute at that time. I personally do things like I have an Excel document for my jobs, and every single time I apply for a job, I like write the name, I write if it's part-time or full-time, I write where it is. And once I finish applying for it, I make it this like medium gray color. And it's like, boop, now I'm tracking my stuff and I know what's out there and I can like kind of honor a self-satisfaction that I submitted something. Because you know, like you make something, you like it, and then 2 seconds later you hate it. So that sucks. So to kind of like honor and stand in the glow of my own doing, which kind of helps like in a slowing down pace and honoring the work that you're doing does help you try to approach being more balanced. So I do that. And then when I get something, like if I get an interview, I make it light yellow. If I get it, I make it bright yellow. If I don't get it, I make it dark gray. And I just like super organize it. And weirdly enough, like, again, more to my credit that I am not balanced. I last year applied for over 60 jobs, which is more than applying for a job each week. And that was with a full-time job. And that didn't include any of my art applications. But that's because I was freaking hell-bent on getting out of there and wanting to put myself in the ether. I think really investing in my relationships is what I did when my career was not what I wanted it to be. And I wasn't that industrious in applying in my first 2 or 3 years out. Also, there was a pandemic, but I had to get into the practice of like, how do I write a cover letter? How do I find this thing? Not the most soul-sucking, horrible thing where I feel like I'm putting out my heart and soul and they're rejecting me. You know, I had to overcome whatever all of those feelings felt like. And I really found that through investing in my relationships. I spoke to Christine from a personal place last summer. I got a job offer at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, but it was being like a woodshop technician. And it was kind of like the most glitzy job that I'd been offered at that time. But also my grandma was sick, and I just spent 3 years investing in my friendships. I was like, no, like my jobs are not a good representation of me. Like I do well at them, and certain aspects of them are pleasurable, but it's not teaching, it's not writing, it's not authentically in the arts, or it's not in academia. So it doesn't feel fully aligned in the way I want it to be. Yeah, I'm teaching, so I'm loving that part. I'm nurturing students. I love that part. Or, oh, I'm working and I'm learning woodworking. That's awesome. But like, it's a private owned institution. There's no accreditation. I can't like go off script. Like there's a lot of times where I was just very like, I guess when you're uncomfortable, you're very aware of where things are not serving you. So, I tried to lean into the parts that were and really enjoy that and get all the transferable skills I could feasibly get. And then essentially find a way to share that story in my applications. And then I really put a lot of focus in on my relationships. Like I moved back home, and it's also been able to help afford me my current lifestyle doing all of these jobs. And all these jobs being all these part-time jobs. And I've been really like tending to those relationships. My grandma passed last year, and I was able to live with her and have a way more robust, close connection with her. And that was also part of the decision on not taking the Milwaukee job. And I've since started a romantic relationship. It's now 2 years in. And I think really when my job wasn't what I wanted it to be, I was investing myself in my emotional relationships. And my relationships have now grounded me for when I'm now out here running around like a crazy person, doing all these like adjunct positions and interviews. I'm really grounded by the people that I've invested my time in advance, and I continue to make time for them now. So I think that's kind of the way in which I've kind of struck my own balance. I also remember, I don't know if Ranu is still the chair right now, but she was when I was graduating. And she said something that I was definitely, I think, more in a scarcity mindset when I was going into graduating. And she was saying something like, as long as you can, try not to get a full-time job. And I was like, girl, bye. I need that money. No. And you will know what's right for you, and you will kind of go at your own pace. But since leaving my full-time job, there's so many times where I'm like often reminded things like, man, I want to buy a house and I can't, or I want to do these things and maybe that's not it. But everything has its time. And I would say that what I've noticed is like, if I put again, like the positive words to it makes sense for me. And so I've just been saying to myself over and over again that this is my pollinator year. And that is what is driving me. And what that means for me is essentially I'm trying to be a pollinator. I'm essentially a freelance worker. If you think about it, every collaboration I make is that kind of cumulative investment in myself. And that creates like value in me as an applicant, in me as somebody that they want to hire, in me, someone they will eventually want to offer a 10-year position to, or a full-time professorship position to, by doing a project with George Washington University Museum is a beautiful partnership. Like whatever I do this summer is going to be a beautiful partnership. And writing for Dirt and going to this Washington Project for the Arts Symposium, all of these things are keeping me in the ether, and people are going to keep knowing who I am. And I'm going to keep making all of these connections where I would be stifled, and I would be stifled in the way that I wouldn't be making as many connections if I had a full-time job. But the inverse that I will say to the positive of the full-time position is you're going to really make a more substantial connection because you'll be having more time with them. But I'm just telling myself it's my pollinator year. It's my year to make connections. It's my year to get out there. And then the more you know people, the more opportunities come your way. So I don't know. That's been my path. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is there anything you guys are afraid of?
Graduating.
Why are you afraid of graduating?
I think it's exciting, but also fear just of not having the institution behind me. But I think it's kind of the same thing in a way. I don't know. I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I will say, if you don't have to move away, don't. It's really easy to, it's easier to be like, I consider myself kind of like a unknown entity where it was like, no one was going to Google the spaces I worked at in the Bay to like know the caliber. But I think a great way to start is to figure out where your studio is going to be, like numero uno. If you know where your studio is, maybe you're going to be practicing alongside other people. If you're practicing along other people, you're meeting new people. A lot of times studio spaces have the opportunity for you to show your work on a regular basis within the studio. Like they have a studio membership exhibition annually. And then somebody might ask you like, oh, you're an artist? Like, I can't tell you how many times I got into Ubers in San Francisco and they were like, you're an artist? And I'll be like, oh yeah. And if I said, oh, my studio's here, or they ask you that question, like it gives you the opportunity to again be making these connections. I had one of those issues where I didn't stay in the Bay because I couldn't find a studio and a lot of things weren't connecting in that way. Also, you can always reach out to like your faculty member even before you leave to consider like, would they collaborate with you? Would they let you show their work? These are other ways where you can still play with your current connections. Or same thing with your cohort members. If there's anyone you're close to, you can start a new body of work together. And it kind of keeps the relationships going where you don't have to be, you know, flushed out to sea on your own.
And can you repeat what Maria told you, Maria Borges?
What Maria told me?
And how wrong she was.
Oh, so I love Maria Porges. I love her to death. So no hate, Maria. But Maria Porges, I told her, I met her up in like Oakland when I had finally realized that I was going to move back home. And it was heartbreaking for me because I'm madly in love with the Bay Area. So it was a very hard and slow process for me to come to that conclusion. So anyways, I told Maria, we met for coffee, and she told me that it was going to be career suicide moving to Washington, D.C. And I swear the emotional agony when things weren't moving or weren't existing in the way that I wanted, I would keep like retelling that narrative to myself. Like, oh my God, I love Maria. I hold her on such a high, you know, with such high regard. And here this woman's going to tell me that she has family in Northern Virginia and she knows that Washington, D.C.'s art scene's shit and that it's career suicide. And essentially what Christine wants me to say is she's wrong. And in so many ways she is wrong in that capacity. Basically, I think that DC is definitely a lot harder to find the arts than it is in San Francisco. So I'm not by any means going to make light of that. And it's kind of like close to the vest. It's a lot of like everyone who works in the institutions are kind of like more in the know. So you have to kind of make your way there by hook or by crook or meet those people. But you don't have to like be in a grad program to meet those people. You just go to those shows, right? Like there's no reason you can't continually go to show openings at CCA, show openings. I don't need to tell you every place you go, like Southern Exposure. There's like aggregate space gallery, like your Rowena Center for the Arts, you know, go to these places. It's where everyone goes. You don't, you know, if you know the watering hole, you don't have to go to school if you're going to still tap the same resources of the people where you know that when you know where you're going to find them. So I think that that's really key. And if you do go somewhere else, if that's part of your plan or it becomes your plan, it's really just a matter of, like I said, it's cumulative, just staying in there, fighting the good fight. And I've also just realized that, yeah, to the credit of you being fearful of losing the connection to the institution, it's a valid fear. It's a totally valid fear. And when you do start doing work, whatever that looks like for you, even if it's like an internship, I started interning at a museum and I started hearing about a bunch more open calls, which led to me getting to show my work at a museum. That's all I needed, right? Like sometimes just getting yourself in the right circle is crucial. So it's really like we can all be like little sad boy artists and curl up in a ball at home and like, you know, lick our wounds and feel sad and want to isolate. But we also like have to find the inner strength to like shower, look cute, put on our fire outfit and go out to the show and socialize with people at your yoga class and do whatever the things that you are that you do, you know, like be out there, because wherever you're meeting people, you're there, which means that people like you are there, right? So it's going to keep bringing you the right people. You just have to like remain open to connections and remain open to communicating with like new people.
Any more questions? Do the people online have any questions? Like Vanessa, Diana, Mary, do you have any questions?
I definitely feel like I have a bunch of questions, but I'm gonna take up the offer on the email and like write it down. If that's okay, Mallory?
Yeah, could you give me a teaser? Can you give me one in real life, but you can send me all the others via email?
Yeah, well, I think I've been looking at your performance work and it's something that I have been exploring too. And I was still here during the break. I didn't know if I was not meant to be here, but I've been sitting here. And I was also working with labor and mother and stuff. So I kind of wanted to know more about how you maneuver performance work and installation in spaces, because I've definitely had issues with understanding how to do that. It's not the same as hanging a picture or painting.
No, it's not. It's not. And it's a really good question. I think of like, I will just kind of I'll take it out of the context of performance and I'll bring it right back. But taking it out of that context, I think of it kind of like I came from a kind of traditional like learning practice of like drawing and painting. And I feel like when you learn simple things like line drawing, right? For example, they're always asking you like what line needs to be there and what is superfluous, what doesn't have to be there, right? So I think the same thing can be said. And for me, for at least the longest of times, at least grad school work, for the most part, it was that the performance, I did the performance when it was exhibited. I did not do it when people weren't necessarily there. Again, we can have this whole conversation of like a tree falls in the forest. Does anyone hear it? Blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm not going to go down that. But I did it because I wanted people to interact with it. That was the point. So why I would go there when no one was there, that seems counterintuitive. So asking yourself, like, what is the point? Are people supposed to see it? Are people supposed to interact with it? I mean, would you just go laying on your rock in your studio? Yeah, sure, I might. But if it's not like, it's a collective language of figuring out how to approach this thing. So it needs to be a collective performance. It needs to be a collective experience. So I think that becomes a conversation. The reason I did performance in exhibition spaces was because it was the nonverbal invitation to approach the work in that way. In other formats, and there's again like a million conversations of like, where are you showing it? And a lot of them don't have insurance, and then your thing can get ruined. So then how are you approaching that with that level of understanding, like this might cause harm? And I have that in my artist statement. I literally say like, my materials are durable, but they like have the potential for break and ruin. So it elicits, like it like requires that the participant exercise care, and that level of consideration is also integral in what I'm asking them to do. So I think that that's like also very special. And then a lot of times I think, more recently with this new stuff with my new pal, if you will, we're figuring it out. But originally we were thinking like, just shoot the video, just document it. This is not to be performed for other people. We thought that it was going to be this like very like militant, like almost satirical, infomercial like thing. And as we started doing it, it just was not that at all. And we were like, we had no time because I had honestly some random network event that I was going to go to after that. So I had to skirt off. But we like looked at the footage together for a short bit, and we talked. It was like an hour and a half away. So I like spoke on the phone with her for an hour and a half. And we were kind of like we looked at the footage a bit together. And then we were unpacking once we did that, like what now came up? Like, what do we think it is now that we experienced it? Now that's not just an idea. And we're now having a week apart, and we're like still writing the same shared document, and we're going to come together and like unpack it. And so for us now, like, I think another really interesting creative choice that like we have now since talked about is this feels like we're also realize we're both older sisters. And so we wanted it to be kind of this creating of sisterhood. We wanted it to be this kind of really intimate moment. So we're talking about deleting the audio. Like, no voyeur, like this was our moment. You can perceive the intimacy, but it's not yours to consume. You're not actually participating in it. Like, is your string attached to me, my man's? Like, no, like she is. So this idea of how are people entering the work becomes interesting. When I've shown my sculptures specifically, like as a singular sculpture, not really like a ton of my work, just like boop, one thing. I've like shown a still of the performance, like the stills I've shown, because I like the idea that this thing isn't just a static blob. It like has a relationship to the body. So sometimes just a still from the performance is enough. So just constantly asking yourself, like, when is it enough? And again, I just love to think about the line drawing as a really good analogy. So yeah, I don't really see that like this most recent 2-person tampon thing as being really a performance. And again, we wanted this like sexy, glossy, gray background that no one knows where we are, blah, blah, blah. And since we like, severed our tie, we were out here looking at these stairs being like, kind of want to run up these stairs together. I kind of want to keep playing, kind of might want to leave the space, like might want to take this show on the road. So that might now become this new iteration of performance in person, something that may or not be like, may or may not be documented. But again, it asks kind of always, who is this for, and what, and like how is the work supposed to be perceptively seen? Again, like if I just just bloop a rock on the floor like that, no one's gonna think to touch it. No one's gonna think to lay on it. So I need to like do the extra clue to kind of like, point the viewer in a direction. But if it's just like not the space for it to be safely, touched, shall we say, then I'm not going to perform with it. So I think that like that's kind of some of the ways I approach doing that. And I just want to like have a 2-second moment with what you're saying about mothers and labor and stuff. And I don't know. I bought a necklace that says mom. That's new. I'm not a mother. I totally feel into this archetype of being a mother before being one. And I'm also a Cancer, so that's probably half of the reason. But I also lost my grandmother, and she's my mother's mother, and I lost our family's matriarch, and I'm seeing my mother go through the steps and the growing pains of becoming the matriarch. And my new friend and I are looking at how liberal people are romanticizing the conservative life of being a homesteader. And I'm like, why do I want that? And where's that coming from? And yeah, one thing I just want to share on that when we were chatting about it was we were looking at, weirdly enough, this all keeps going back to American history. And it was like in the Revolutionary War, they were talking about how women were doing the homespinning work. And then that was like the nexus for how women gathered, and that women had to do like homespun work. And that there became this kind of pastoral myth, and that women never did all this work. Essentially, it was the men who lived in the home, and it was family work, and it was all within the family. And then essentially, it was industrialization that pulled the men out, where that work was no longer shared. But when I mentioned Revolutionary War, was because when we tried to separate from Great Britain, we had to have local economies that were self-sufficient so that we could sever that tie. And ironically, think about it, it's the mother nation or mother country and the daughter like colonies or whatever. So there's so funny, all of these interesting like female termed relationships that get thrown around here. And when I was thinking about industrialization, the reason when the men get plucked out of the home, well, then all that work is now, and the pastoral myth is now, oh, the woman has to do all this crap when she never did all this crap. So like, you know, hey, fuck that. And then this is a myth that we're now being forced to comply with. And I want to be a mother. And I think a lot now that I'm, you know, ever so slightly getting my toes in the world that I want to be in. I'm like, well, am I going to get exit stage right? Like, no, I don't want that. How do I sustain being in this place and do these things? And how do I do it in a conscientious way? What does that look like to me? You know, kind of like the conversation of what is success, all of those things. And the reason I weirdly think this idea is so desirable for this kind of liberal woman, even though it's a quote conservative lifestyle, is because we now estranged everything to be separate, right? The woman now works out here, the man works out here. And this is of course a very heteronormative thing. And I don't mean to say that, but I'm trying to unpack the very like cis heteronormative nuclear family. And you have the two partners essentially working out here separate from the home. They have the labor of the home that's being put on the kind of female character. And then it's like, where's childcare? It's also out of the home. The reason the homesteading life is so freaking desirable is because all of them can be at home, which in some ways we've already seen how that works and doesn't work because of the pandemic, right? Trying to teach your kids how to read and like do school stuff and you're not a teacher. But that's also part of the pastoral myth, because they didn't do it alone. They didn't do it alone. There was like these homespunning communities, and there was neighbors. And if you had chickens, you gave your eggs. And if they had bread, they gave you bread. It was never this like fucked up capitalist idea of individualism and having this completely like full operating machine nuclear family. It was a complete network of people.
A community.
It's been a community that's been
communal, yeah.
Yeah, and it's been completely siphoned down to being the community's responsibilities are now housed in the woman archetype or the mother archetype. And how is she supposed to subdivide and be everywhere? Because she can't. You're setting her up to fail. And we've all said this for forever and ever and ever and ever. But since I'm really not there yet, probably 5 years or something. But I want to know before I get there, right? I don't want to find myself in a pickle and not be knowing how I want to approach that. Career, success, rigor. I don't want that to have to compromise, but I also don't want my child to be 1 year old or an infant and be in daycare. Like, I don't know what that looks like. You know, I don't, but it is really interesting to kind of have all those thoughts come up and try to unpack all of those things and see that kind of ending and death of my grandma has kind of really triggered that, like, when one dies, like, we all, like, the family then welcomes the baby. So it's like the family mind is like coming towards not the end of mourning, because that's always going on, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's
bringing more care.
The process, like the cycle is turning, the wheel is turning. We know what comes next after this. We know the next step is baby. We don't know when baby, but we know baby's next after death. So it's like, how does one ready themselves for that? And especially in this career when everyone tries to pretend like you're so quick to be replaced. So yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. But I see people here at Corcoran who have kids, and it's cute, and I want to figure out how that works. But thank you for your question, and I do really look forward to your email.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Mallory. My name's Mary. Sorry, my video's off because I'm not feeling so well, but
That's okay.
it's been really fun listening to your talk and also this Q&A and talking about motherhood. But my question for you was around your teaching applications. I'm so impressed that you sent out 60 applications in a year. That's so nuts. And I'm wondering like I'm wondering like what you learned from that, or like if you changed your approach like halfway through, or yeah, if you have any like wisdom for somebody who's looking to get into that.
Thank you for that question. Well, I would say that like I use Google Drive all the time. So I just consider that my archive of all my documents. So if I like apply for something curatorial minded, then, and it's like so common. I just like want to put it out there. It's so common. I've applied for the same job 3 years in a row. Like I have done it where I'm like, let me see what I did last year. Let's see where my new experience is as of now. Let's see like, how do I want to approach this similarly or different? And like, does like the sheer fact of new and different and more experience help, hurt, improve my chances, blah, blah, blah. So I think that archive is really helpful because you have already invested your time and effort into creating the language. So don't reinvent the wheel every single time. I still always make time to, you know, do more than just change like the to whoever, you know what I mean? I still take time to be like the impetus for like, you know, my impetus for applying for this position is blah, blah, blah. Something I will say is no one wants a fan, they want a colleague. I think that's really important advice. So like if you're applying for, let's say this like amazing art museum, art gallery, don't be like, and I totally loved when you did this thing. And I mean, I know you're not gonna say totally loved, but you get my point. Even if you compliment their like gallery program, that's more a by word of mouth thing. And even that I would dial down. You can say something like along the lines of like saying that you think they have a rigorous, you want to like support or invest in their rigorous gallery program. That is showing your contribution. And again, arguably say how, not just blanketed statement, right? So always show, never tell. But yeah, just kind of avoid being a fan. I think that's like a huge thing because there's so many times where I could be like, oh, the Renwick, I loved the show Wonder in 2016. And I could be like, blah, 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 like this. And that doesn't help. That doesn't help me go because I'm a fan. And then I'm writing essentially from a place beneath them and not as their peer. So it will always translate as that and it won't go anywhere. So that's like one thing for sure. If you meet people in real life, like in any event, and you're like, oh my God, you're a cool contemporary curator and I want to know you. Don't just say, hi, let me tell you about my practice. It's like super bad decorum because like you're not giving a shit about them. You're just being like a little professional predator, you know? So like, wait, ask them about them, ask them about like, you know, the show that they did recently or whatever. And then you're already like hearing the work they like to show. They're already telling you. Then you can go, oh my God, I'm an artist. And then you just contextualize your practice in what they just told you. Like, oh, I do experiential, like whatever I'm trying to say, like experiential art. Oh, I do this, but I do it this way. And now you've already hooked them without like blabbering your, you know, unrequested facts on them. They don't want that. For 60 application kind of stuff, again, that came because I had 3 years of like having been writing applications, like a ton. I have different CVs. Like my teaching CV looks different than my like arts management CV, which looks different than my kind of curator CV. My curation CV has like my curation experience, and then my curatorial projects and the list of the things that I've curated. Like it starts with that because that's the focus I want to share. Arts management is going to be all my arts, like all my jobs, like up front. If I'm a teacher, ironically enough, in terms of being a professor, which some people are really icked out and think it's very taboo to call yourself an adjunct professor, which I think is funny. They're like, you're an instructor, you're not a professor, you haven't earned that. And I was like, why do we keep moving the line? Like, once I arrive, you're like, nope. But that's another thing altogether. So, when it comes to that, ironically enough, they don't want you to show that you're literally taught until the very end. Like that is like arguably taboo to be like, I taught here, 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 here. Like that's not what you do. You start with like your showing record, because if you're showing your work, it shows that people give a shit about what you're doing and you're doing something that people care about, which means that you're arguably talking about the human collective because enough people care about what you're talking about that it's landing shows. And if you're landing shows, then you're relevant. And people like institutions only want relevant people. So you're like, oh, boom, all these things in 2023, boop, relevant, got it. You know, then you might like list your publications or your professional talks and then all this stuff. And then eventually, boop, 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 way far down, it's like the teaching things that you've done. Because you don't want to go, hi, I'm a teacher, because then you've just kind of squashed more of the research school opportunity. You might be opening yourself to more of a teaching institution. I'm still trying to think if there's like any more pearls for the teaching or the applying process. Like I said, with the job stuff, I do the same thing for art applications. I make those Excel documents. I also have a Word document that I just call art apps. And then I literally just drop a link and like a 1-line thing, like art residency, whatever the place is, or just the region or something. So I have a general mind's eye towards it. And then I write the deadline. And then I put it in like, I guess, reverse chronological order, whichever one's like soonest is first. And then I just keep going back there and I go, hey, like, is there anything else on my list? And that's like, because Instagram has stuff over here. My newsletters on my email say something. I see something at work. I just try to like put it in one spot. At different times, I knew like March was super hectic. I started writing it down in terms of like on a separate sheet of paper. And I wrote like, in this week, these are all the things in this order. And I even started prioritizing them because I was trying to be on a frenzied application run.
Mallory,
Yeah.
have you applied to 60 jobs? How many art things did you apply to last week?
I don't know. Oh, thank you, Christine. That I don't know. And that's actually my next bit of advice. So thank you. I didn't apply for a lot because I wasn't making a lot. And then that's why I'm like so excited and was showing all my like partial process things, because again, like I now don't have a full-time job and a 2-hour commute. I now don't have to grade all this shit all the time. I don't have to write lessons every single night. So I'm getting a bit of that time back for myself, which is super liberating as a creative person. But what I will say, which was absolutely the pearl of wisdom walking away from my 60 job applications, I think my art applications were like low, like 10, 15, like it was low. But I think that was more again because like I was putting my focus on getting out of a place that was more harmful for my mental health and was like whatever it takes. But in the context of art applications, it is important that you don't essentially do kind of what I did, like don't do 60 job applications and like 10 art applications. What I was saying to myself when I like saw that was like, wow, praise, you did a great job. But and there's not but, like, period. You did a great job, period. And let's put some of that energy over into my making practice, because at the end of the day, I have 61 use essays that don't have any like greater life to them. If I put some of that energy into making an object, making an art project, writing my own little idea down, that I can publish, I can share, I can put in multiple shows, and that is like a greater investment in myself than 60 one-use letter essays that may or may not garner my job or the job that I was hoping to get. So I do think, kind of also back to whoever asked me that question earlier on like work-life balance, that's a really good thing to learn by way of me being the one who learned it the hard way. I think that's like a much better investment in yourself. To kind of like parse out some of those things. Also, I just feel like don't be egoic and hate the idea of an internship. I think like really a lot of these institutions that are bougie, that give us a good job, that pays well, that's hard to get into, they don't freaking swoon at us straight out of grad school. I don't know why. It's sad. It's a bummer. But and if you get it, I mean, awesome, mazel tov. I'm happy for you. But otherwise, I would just say like go for the internship, because again, you're gonna meet those people, you're gonna make those connections, they're gonna know you, and a lot of those places want to do internal hires anyways. Like I'm literally 4 years out and I'm still applying for internships, and I'm like, damn, this is like my last year, and then I'm out too long to apply for them. So I'll share at least that much.
Thank you. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Mallory, what was like the best piece of advice from CCA? Like what was?
I don't know if I have the best piece of advice, but I feel like there's just a few things that always like there are random things that will just keep popping back up in my head, and I'm like, I gotta revisit that because that person said this. For my Dundalk worksheets that I sent my students, that I'm trying to make that like little compilation publication about. I'm trying to remember his name now. He now works at San Jose State. He was a painting professor. Do you know who I'm talking about, Christine?
No, sorry.
That's a real bummer. I really am sad that I am forgetting him. In my defense, no hate to him. In my defense, I only had one unit with him my very first semester. So, okay. But he was the one who told me that basically all other occupations out there are tasked with solving problems, and that artists are the only ones who essentially like they're not tasked with solving problems. They're tasked with asking questions, and better yet, it's actually like their job to make problems. And I thought that was the most amazing, liberating thing ever. And I kind of tried to even bring that to the idea that their solution could be just making a problem or a bigger problem out of the thing that's not working for them. So I loved that one. I remember Kim Ano told me that I should go and take these furniture classes and learn fine joinery, and then find new and creative ways to bring different materials together. I thought that, and I don't know why, I think about that all the time. Even when I'm in this class, like teaching my students like life casting with plaster, I'm like, oh, let's cast my elbow. I don't know what things I'm going to bring together. I think about her saying that. I think about you talking about sharing applications for teaching, and you were like, spray, Mallory, just spray. Just want to spray it everywhere, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so Christine. This like borderline obscene way of sharing things is this like, I don't know, feral way of spraying myself out there. But I said, and I said this in the break for anybody who was around, but I didn't mean to be exclusionary, so I'll say it again. I recently started doing that. So if you are interested in adjunct teaching, basically make your documents, whatever they look like. You can always ask your faculty, like you don't have to use that woman resource. I just did. I just think she's awesome. She's super smart. The book's amazing. If you don't want to work with her and you want to pay the big price tag for like having her edits, read the book, also super helpful. But also like talk to your faculty members. I know Kim Ano has shared some of her documents with a cohort member of mine. I know Christine has shared some of hers with me. If you've ever done graduate teaching assistantship work with people, I worked with Megan Werner. I love that woman so profoundly. I I told her, I was like, oh my God, they have this 3D studio and I have to do plaster, and I've never worked with plaster a day in my life. What am I going to do? And we sat down and we like had a Zoom call and caught up in each other's lives. And I remember her telling me about her 2-year-old daughter, and here her daughter's like talking, and it's like, I don't even know what, like, feels like 8 years old or something crazy. Anyways, so that was just fantastic, and she helped give me resources I would otherwise never had. And those connections don't end when you leave the school. It's really a matter of you taking the initiative to go there and do that. So spray. And that goes for when you apply for an adjunct pool. And I used to be so emotionally defeated by the idea of applying for an adjunct pool. I was like, I'm just gonna like scream into the void and no one will ever choose me, and why am I gonna do that, and what a lack of a good investment in my time and energy. And I applied to the pool. I sent a couple emails. They didn't go anywhere, but I also applied for like Marymount whatever university or something, and it's like Catholic school that's like so not my brand anyways. So okay. And yeah, I worked with her, developed the materials, and now I started doing the spray. I was like, you know what? I don't want my current teaching position to be a past experience when I'm applying. I want to be applying when it's present. That always means way more to people than like being like, hey, I'm unemployed, please help. There's like no harm in that, and please still apply for things when you are. But and I have been for like 6 months to a year at one point, but it's easier when you still have a job. So I like started doing the spray thing, and I was not applying because at first I was doing the very cordial, polite thing. I was applying to the portal, sending the email with all the attachments saying, hello, I applied to the portal, i.e. I followed your rules. All the stuff is there. You can come find me, but also don't hurt yourself. It's all right here. And when I had all of it there, that works, but it takes so long. And if you're really going for this, like all these schools, and they may or may not have an opportunity, and they may or may not read your email, it's really worthwhile to spray. So I just started sending only the same blanketed email. I changed the little impetus part on as to why I want to apply for that school. And I do the same thing in my cover letter. So it's specific to them. I do this off and on, so take it with a grain of salt, but I sometimes like do that weird like mail address where I'm like, where I literally write out the school's address and the department and this whole thing so it looks fancy. Sometimes I do that. I do that for my adjunct things because I want it to look fancy. So I change that, and then I like send it all out. But I just did it all via email. I've been sending like 4 or 5 out like each night. This is my version of spray. And people have been getting back to me. I now have a fall adjunct position, and I have an interview on Monday for one that they need someone to teach in both summer and fall. So I'm like, I'm your girl, let's go for it. And that person asked for me to present a 5 to 7 minute demonstration on how to teach like a principle of design. And it's like, what the F is going to be a 5 to 7 minute demonstration? But I'm like, gonna go back to what I did in high school and think about like, how can I package this in a very succinct way? Right? People don't really have an attention span that's like more than, yeah.
I think your ergonomics slides, your slides about ergonomics stuff were so much about design. Like you have so much to talk about in terms of what ergonomic means. Like what does ergonomic design mean? Like it's like you can, I don't know, I feel like you already have the content.
Okay, cool. Then I might do that. I was gonna give some like very like rudimentary thing since it's like a community college. I was gonna go like, this is this principle, design principle. This is someone who does it, who's like a very rigorous artist, and they do it in a multiplicity of ways. Let me explain the different ways in which we're seeing it. Let's do a baby exercise. Let's take the baby exercise and graduate it to another new rendition that's been further enhanced. And then you're like 5 to 7 minutes, but I'm open.
That sounds good too.
Yeah. I
Pretends better, Mallory.
Yeah, I don't even know what I was saying prior to that now that I said that, but, oh, yeah, so just spray. That was really great advice. Maria Porges saying career suicide, not great advice. Love her. I told you, Michelle Carlson said, show, don't tell in your applications. I think these are some of the best little moments. Even in retrospect now, hearing Ranu say like, oh, try to do whatever you can to like not have a full-time job. I still feel like that's too much of a blanketed statement, but I'm understanding through like the lens of my pollinator approach, like why that works for me. And if I didn't say that earlier, or if I said that during the break, I'm just saying that this is my pollinating year. It's all about me making as many connections as humanly possible and kind of treating myself like a freelance worker. I have more value if I've made all these different collaborative projects because it shows that I'm relevant and I'm relevant in all these different contexts. Which will just make me once again like more commodifiable. I know it's like annoying, but I'm constantly looking through the lens of like, how do I make myself more commodifiable? How do I make myself an asset? How do I make myself someone they want to pay, someone they want to hire? Because that is part of the name of the game, part of the hustle.
Mallory, can you tell me about your cohort? How many, like, where is your cohort?
So I think this is so funny. I was actually going to say this, so I really love the prompt. I think what's so hilarious in retrospect was how competitive grad school felt. I did not get the Barclay Simpson, and much love to all of you who did. Big congrats. But I did not. And I was what I considered a late bloomer. It took me some time to figure out what the flying F I was doing. I always say that like grad school is like an ice pick lobotomy. You like come in with this thing and you're like, I make this. And they go, you don't make that anymore. And then they like hollow you out and like backfill you with CCA rhetoric. And then you're like, but what am I doing? And I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And then you finally get it just in time to be like kicked out, you know? So that's how I saw grad school at least. And I think that everyone has so much to offer. And the humor is that what CCA does for itself is it secures really great opportunities, like the Headlands opportunity, like the Barclay Simpson. It brings opportunities to you. But if you never got those opportunities, it does not say anything about you and whether or not you have value. And the other totally crazy thing is you and your cohort members have literally nothing in common. Like beyond the fact that you pay to go to school together, like, you're both artists, cool, awesome, great. But, you pretty like nothing about your practice really goes together. Maybe they put you beside each other in your thesis exhibition, but beyond that, like the context of your practices will almost never intersect and you'll almost never apply for the same thing again. So this is just a total false construct of being like in competition with one another. So I think that's like so important to say. What I know, because I don't keep up with everybody by any means, but what I know was I was keeping up with Vincent Miranda. Ironically, so I knew that he was like staying in the Bay, had a studio at Root Division, then got a studio at CCA through some sort of fellowship thing. Had a solo show at the Museum of African Diaspora. Then like went to Florida where he's from and did like a residency, and then was gonna move to New York. That's the last thing I heard. I haven't really heard since. I know that for a while at least Preston was like, he was like an abstract painter, and he's been doing a lot more like kind of like commercial gallery stuff. I swear he was like kind of like climbing the ranks in terms of that. And honestly, I don't feel like Zoe's the other person I really hang out with. I was like, I don't feel like I talk to that many people. Zoe is in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she works at a kind of like fabrication lab, and she is creating all of these really cool programs for young girls called like She Codes and stuff. And She does like so much. She's like really high up in that company as well. And she also is running their exhibition space there. And she curates some. So yeah, I mean, I don't really keep up with a ton of them because I totally moved to the other side of the country from them. But other than that, like everyone seems to be doing well. A lot of people were very preoccupied in wanting to be artists, and I feel like I was very preoccupied in wanting to be a professor or do academia a little bit more than most of my cohort members. So it doesn't surprise me that I haven't heard of them in those contexts. Oh, I think Danny Lopez was adjunct teaching at some school. I don't remember where, but she was adjunct teaching somewhere, and then she just went to Penland and did a residency there. That's the only other person I know about.
Nice. Okay, it's 7, so we gotta go, but that was so amazing. Everyone is loving it.
I'm so glad. I hope that really helped. As per usual, / what my PowerPoint said, my email is my full name, Mallory, Mallory. My middle name is Ryan, Ryan, and my last name is Kimmel, like Jimmy, Kimmel, and it's all at gmail.com. So Mallory Ryan Kimmel at gmail.com. And if you want to like suss out who the heck I am before you talk to me, you can go to my website, same thing, MalloryRyanKimmel.com. But thank you all. It's been a blessing and a total treasured moment for me to share all of this with you and to answer your questions. But if you have any more, please feel free to send me them. Even if you want to send me a question 2 years from now, because you remember, I totally understand.
Thank you, Mallory. You did really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have a wonderful
you.
evening.
Very grateful. Okay.
All right, bye.
Let's see. So for people who are online, we're gonna do Zoom next week. Okay, so we're gonna do Zoom next week. I'm gonna be out of town. Thanks for your attention. Yeah.
That was so good.
Wasn't it? It was amazing. I feel like I was like, I'm not paying her, but I gave her like so much advice.
Thank you. That was fun.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
You think they'll go on for the TV, are gonna talk to the It'll be well used.
Oh my God, it was recording. She's gonna hear me say that.